Hi, Kielyn. Welcome to Hello Universe. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, the first question that we like to ask our guests is what's something that's life teaching you right now?
Yeah, that's a big question. There's a lot of things that are happening uh, in my life that are trying to teach me, and like I'm trying to unpack it all. But one of the things that is going through my head and sort of my being is coming to understand who I am and like what my purpose is
Mm,
in life right now, because um it's sort of, I think sometimes people use exhaustion as like a what's the word, like a um sign of um sorry, let me just, or
yeah, take
like
your time.
busyness as like a status symbol. So like, oh, like I'm
Mm,
so busy, like, oh, what are you up to? Oh, so much, like going through this, that, and the other thing. And Dave and I recently decided to stop our retail portion of our business just completely. And that was like one of the most profitable parts of our business.
mm,
And so that business just sort of took over our lives and, sort of ran our lives without us even trying. And so we just decided to completely pump the brakes on that because we were recognizing that we weren't having any time to enjoy life outside of work, and we're having a hard time finding like a work-life balance.
mhm.
And so then we went on this amazing epic expedition, and we're back from that. And so now my world, now that I've been back and I just finished this busy season, my world is sort of just like silent right now, where I'm
Mm,
just like, whoa, okay, this is like a new me. Like I'm starting to like relearn who I am, what I want to do, and also can I be happy with laying low? Um, because I think with alone and just our business on social media, I'm a lot of the time in that sort of role of being like, here I am, these are the things I'm doing, this is what I want to, inspire you to do today. And now I'm just able to take a moment to breathe and like
mm,
just reevaluate what truly makes me happy. And then where can I take that to serve the community? Because
mm,
I do feel like it's our job in life to make a difference in some way. And so for me, I almost feel like guilty because I live in such a beautiful, peaceful place that it is my own retreat, but that just seems really selfish. That's like, no, like I need to be doing something to contribute to the greater good. And
mm,
so yeah,
mm.
there's like a lot that's unpacking for me right now.
Yeah. Can I just give a
Well,
little bit of context for our listeners? Because I know you mentioned that you went on this expedition. So I follow you on Instagram. And so it's spring now as we record this. So you're referring to your winter expeditions in Canada where you take, um, actually, would you mind talking a little bit about that off the top? Just like what it
yeah,
is that you and Dave, your partner, do?
for sure. Yeah, we are a winter-based company where we take people out on snowshoe expeditions, all from 1 week all the way up to 3 weeks in length. And we use traditional style snowshoes. We pull our own toboggans. We sleep in a canvas tent heated by a wood stove. We cut all our own firewood. We're traveling on the frozen lakes and rivers, and just sort of move as this sort of mobile tribe for 1 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, in like
And
freezing cold weather.
yep. Yeah, like it's true Canadian winter for sure. And then this past winter, we decided that we were going to try and cross Ontario by snowshoe. So from Lake Superior to James Bay in the Arctic Ocean. So it was 700 kilometers by foot in the deepest, darkest depths of winter. And we had 13 people total. So Dave, myself, and 11 participants. And so that took us 72 days. And that's sort of an abnormal season for us. Normally it's sort of the 1 to 3 week trips, but we wanted to do a full immersion into the winter and get to see the whole season unfold with the same group.
Wow, 72 days.
What did you, I'm curious what shows up for you in, Eva's spoken about meditation retreat and like spoken about how like the first, like in the beginning, there's a restlessness and that like at a certain point, like you fall deep enough that different things start to unfold. And I'm totally butchering meditation retreat
No, I
experience,
mean, that actually is pretty accurate.
But I'm curious, I imagine something similar happens where at a certain point you're so in the experience that there's like it's like you've fallen through a portal to a new reality. And I'm just really curious to know what, I don't know, wisdom or experiencing shows up for you. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the reasons like our company specifically doesn't do short experiences. So 1 week is our minimum because of that exact reason, that it takes a couple days to even just get into the experience. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. But especially when you're trying to be mindful of the experience that you're having, for a meditation retreat or just being kind of, the type of experiences that we have in nature is meditation in itself. And so people often come on these trips, one, to learn new skills, but also to sort of take a break, to refresh and to get away from the hustle and bustle of their day-to-day lives. So yeah, it takes 3 to 4 days for people to just drop their baggage at the door and get into it. So for 72 days, I think it did actually take a little bit longer for people to dive into it. And I think it was sort of this like survival mechanism of being like, holy shit, we're actually doing this. And like, there's no turning back. So it was sort of like holding on to maybe a little bit of home. But certainly by week 2 and 3, like we were into it. And I think, halfway in, we realized like, holy shit, like there's a whole world out there that we know nothing about. And it doesn't matter. Like we are here. Like we talked a lot about being present and how simple life is on the trail, where it really truly is the things that I need to do today: eat, sleep, poop, find wood, and it's like repeat. And so it's like these things, that simplicity over and over and over again becomes meditative, becomes like your whole world. And I think that does a lot of healing to the individual, I think, without even trying.
Yeah, like no efforting at like story and narration and like picking at your wounds, just like drop beneath all of that into existing and being cold.
Yeah, like it, I'm not trying to downplay the challenge of the trip, because it was physically and emotionally and spiritually difficult, on a daily basis. But I think a lot of the questions didn't even need to be asked. It's like, we know exactly what we need to do today. And we came up with this saying, like, just walk or die. Like, you have no choice. You walk or you die. And a few times we would pepper in the walk and cry as well, because that happened a few times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I imagine it has to come up within 72 days at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Can
we
I-
get real close together, and that's really cool.
Can I ask, as the facilitator, do you find the ability to drop in as much as you witness the people you're bringing on these trips can drop?
I think not as much, for sure, because you don't just have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure that all the other people are, one, taking care of themselves, but then seeing the big picture. Okay, like, how many kilometers do we actually go today? How many more do we have to go? And logistical planning that Dave and I work as a team to do. So, we'll go off and have meetings of like our strategies for the rest of the week, and then like trying to work through any challenges within the group. But yeah, definitely takes away from that. But I think also that Dave and I have enough experience managing that it still was a valuable experience for us personally.
So I grew up in Southern California, like Los Angeles, spent all of my teenage years hanging out at the mall, driving, smoking weed in cars, listening to hip hop, like just a very stereotypical kind of city girl, like no suburban lifestyle where, mud and bugs were disgusting to me. They couldn't be further from what I wanted. I wanted to get like boys' phone numbers. So, and yet here I am at 38, and I know that I've changed so much. And I know this because you're speaking to the meditation of like, life is simple, and you have these like, you have these 4 things that you focus on. And as you were speaking, my body just had this, I almost like wanted to cry, because I felt so, there's something that really speaks to me about that way of life. I can feel myself, I have been already moving, more in this direction, more and more, of wanting to be connected to the land and living in simplicity and getting out of, like the box of like how the traditional life is lived. And we had this whole conversation, Kielyn and I, not too long ago, about alternative lifestyles, which I don't love that phrase, but just the having a choice to just live life on your own terms. And like, and I think not indoctrinated by, capitalism and colonialism. So that just like really speaks to me. So I think I just have a question, like a bunch of questions about building that life for yourself. But I think I want to start by saying, you started by saying that you're reevaluating your purpose here. And I just want to say first, I acknowledge that, because I know what it's like to like have all this time, like, you're stopping all these things that you're doing, and then now you have this open field, and you're kind of like, and it's a little bit quieter. So it's both a gift, but also forcing you to be like, okay, well, what do I want now? And you talked about wanting to like give back to the community, but I really do feel like having people model the kind of existence that you have, even like, okay, let's just go out into the land for 72 days in the cold and like lead groups. That to me, I think is a contribution that you're making in some way, because I think it's really helpful for people to hear those stories and hear that people are doing it and that it's possible, which is partly why I think I selfishly wanted to have you on the podcast, because I'm like, just being in the presence of people who are in this reality is a huge source, I think, for other people who are like, who have the urge to want to do things differently, but maybe not know how. Do you know where I'm going? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. And yeah, like actually last night, Dave and I were talking about that exact thing. I was just like, I want to be inspiring, and like I love photography and writing, and I was like, I think that that's helpful to people to read and see that sort of thing. And I do have people reach out to me quite often after watching Alone and say like what an inspiration it is. But I think also when you're living your own life, it's easy to well, one, be super self-critical, and then just sort of downplay any sort of accomplishment that you have had, and just always want to best yourself.
Totally.
And so yeah, I think that's sort of where I'm at. I have always been hard on myself. I was a competitive athlete all my life. So I was a gymnast from a young age, and you know, competed at the junior national level. And then I had some pretty bad injuries and switched to swimming again, made it kind of up to the junior national level. And so my whole life, and so those were individual sports. And so it was my job to be self-critical, and like always, you know, if I was the one that failed, it was because of me. It was my score. It was my time. I had no one to blame but myself. And so not only my sort of self-criticism, but then also my competitiveness and my Capricorniness.
Capricorn right here too.
That is so funny. Okay, I do sometimes love being psychic because it's just before you said that thought, I wonder what her astrology is, which is never a question I think. And then you immediately said Capricorn. So that was fun.
Yeah. Happy to know you're a fellow Capricorn.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think that having a contribution is not only a selfless thing, but it's also a selfish thing, because you want to know like you're making a difference, and like you have this, unfortunately, like, well, I read a lot of Stoic philosophy, and this idea of sort of immortality through your contribution is like something that you're not supposed to want, but that it's like it is sort of a natural human thing. Like you don't want to be forgotten. But we all die, and you know, 99.9% of us are just going to be forgotten into time immemorial. So yeah, there's just a little bit of that want to do something good enough to be remembered for, you know, by a couple people.
Can I actually ask, and this is for all of us, because I'm really struck by this idea of what it even really means to be like how are we defining kind of purpose and being generative and giving back? I don't have an answer. I have some thoughts, but I think it's so easy for us to get caught up in like, am I being of service? Is this a value? Am I giving back? And to your point, those questions are often so laden with this like inherent sense that it's already not enough because we're all such assholes to ourselves. And so I wonder if I kind of almost want to just pull back and think about what we even mean by that idea. See what we said about getting real philosophical and falling down rabbit holes. But yeah, I just wonder, like, I don't know, what does it even mean to be of service?
Oh my God, I love this question because I have a lot of thoughts, but let's have our guests go first.
Whoa. Wow. Yeah.
Or you can punt to Eva. That's very much
sure.
allowed.
You can also punt back if you want to if you want to push it off to me and give yourself a second to think.
Yeah, let's hear your thoughts.
I don't know if I have more of like a nihilistic perspective, but I'm like, I think I'm okay with not being remembered when I die. Sometimes I get a little relief actually from this idea of like, oh my God, like no one's gonna remember me when I die. Like, thank fucking God. Or, you know, it's like the same feeling that I get when I realize that I'm really small and that I'm insignificant, where I think for some people, people have told me that freaks them out. But for me, there's nothing more liberating because I'm like, okay, it just reminds me of what life is, which is that it's insignificant and it goes by in a flash. We're just here to enjoy our lives. Let's not take everything so seriously. Like it's all good. So part of me is like, I think I relate to what you said, Kielyn, about how it's a little bit selfish, because I know when I was younger, in my 20s, I'm much more like career insecure, I would say, even about my career. My wanting to help people came from an insecure place, because I didn't know this until later on. I thought I was being like so altruistic and so great, and I was helping people. It didn't dawn on me later that it was completely egotistical, because I needed to feel needed and that I needed to prove myself. I had like something to prove. And now I kind of just feel like when I want to contribute, yeah, it's interesting. I've come back into a more sovereign place with it, because it's not egotistical now. Now it's more like, oh, I've connected to real suffering in this world when I and experience or touch into or connect with or have a conversation or see some type of suffering that is undeniable in this world. That to me, then I'm like, I do feel this real sense of, I don't know if I would call it responsibility, but maybe it feels more like love. Like you can't experience suffering and not let that change you. It's just not, I don't think that's possible. And so you're just like, you want to contribute, because for me, I know that I can, simply because I live in a world of privilege. I live in America, so already I live in privilege. And so I think I'm in a good place with that right now, meaning and I'm still trying to figure that out. Like I don't have it figured out in terms of like the how, but I'm happy to say that it feels a lot less egotistical and much more, much more like solid.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot, actually, because as I gain life experience, I also am much more confident in who I am, what my skills are, and like, yeah, who I am as a person. Whereas in my 20s, I was the same as you, like super altruistic, wanting to change the world, and like reading all of like David Suzuki's books, and like, just going, really kind of like pointing at other people and like how they can make a difference in the world. And like, we just all have to do it together. And, but now and especially as a female guide in the guiding world, it's very, well, it used to be very male centric. And so you almost had to get your fists out to show your worth in the industry, without someone saying, oh, like, don't lift that canoe, like, I'll get it for you. Or like, even to the point where Dave and I are running the company together, someone will come to ask a logistical question or something, and they'll turn to Dave for the answer. And it's like, well, I've got the same answer. We have talked about it. We know the plan. But now, like, I think having my experience on a loan and just like moving out to the wilderness, building my own house, living off grid, like I'm just super solid in my skills and who I am, that, yeah, there's a lot less ego involved in sort of that career fetching. So when I say like, oh, I'd like to be remembered, well, actually, that's sort of less of a big thing for me, because I'm with you on kind of admiring the universe as us just being like this wee little speck in it. In fact, Dave has gotten really into astrology, and I'm thinking of like getting him a telescope for his birthday, because he's been like he's been looking through the binoculars at like Mars and Jupiter and stuff. And so just recognizing how small and insignificant we are is actually a really liberating feeling to me as well.
Yeah. What about you, Kylie? Your sound's off. There we go.
I was on mute.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. First of all, I love this question, and want to continue, but I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I just I'm loving both of your answers. I also find my smallness, like in the kind of cosmic sense of the word, really liberating. And that was not the case when I was in my 20s, and also very hooked into very hooked into, like you said, of oh, everyone else has to make the world a better place, and I'm just going to angrily shake my fist. that was a lot of, and then also in my smaller circle, like being a fixer and being important because I was a fixer. Anyway, but now I really find my own smallness in the in the cosmic sense to be really, really, really liberating too. I think the thing that I'm thinking about in this question is how when I think arguably the most generative thing we could do is to be, as Eva always says, be sovereign, right? Like, what's the best contribution we could make? It's nothing to do about an impact that would be measured, and everything to do with how in ourselves, how willing we are to drop into ourselves and then make choices around our existing and interaction and breathing from that place. And so from that, which I feel like is a very Eckhart Tolle kind of, which and then from that place, it actually doesn't fucking matter what you do, right? Whether you never take anyone on a guide, on a tour, and you never post on social media again, it's that becomes its own kind of liberating thing, right? It's the actual contribution is just dropping into ourselves, and then the actions that we take are totally irrelevant, and also their meaning only comes from how in ourselves we are when we make those actions.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm
totally
super happy that you said that, because that is, I've said this on the podcast a million times, that's my MO. I think the biggest contribution we make to the world is how true to ourselves we can be, and how authentic we are, and how free we are. And so going back to what I think, Kylie, you're helping me connect in a much more clear way with the point I was trying to make about Kielyn earlier, is that I think you, just by being you, you building a house, you're living off grid, you're doing the damn thing, that's what I meant when I said it's a contribution, because just by being you, I think you're giving me something for sure. And I think what's so beautiful about that is it confirms my belief is the biggest contribution that you get to give is just being fully yourself. And then the actions that come from that, which is I know everything, whatever, however, living on a homestead and growing your own food or whatever, all those things are just the byproduct. And so I know my greatest teachers have always been the people who are just, it's almost like they're not even trying. They're just being themselves. And then when I'm with them or I'm around them, I'm like, oh, this is what freedom feels like. And thank you for being that, because I need an example of that.
So we're just trying to be your spiritual hype girls, giving you permission to just that's this segment of the show is us just hyping you up, saying you're doing everything already perfectly.
I think, I mean, that's you're making me blush, but and just living within sort of the virtues that you hold as the most important, and sort of every time you make a decision, kind of running through, or anytime you say something, run through and make sure that that is your genuine, authentic sort of guideline as to who am I as a person. And, then that way your interactions with people in the world can really show who you are as a person. I do believe that your actions speak much louder than your words. So, say you say something that you didn't mean to say, but you genuinely are a caring, loving, honorable person. That's gonna go really far, sort of in influencing sort of your circles of friends,
Yeah.
and sort of being, well, I mean, it's like, be the person, or treat others the way you want to be treated, and just, yeah, just sort of always put yourself in check. I think it's important for you to be your authentic self, but that your authentic self might actually be a bad person. And so, like, I don't necessarily think that should just be like a go get her, sister. You go out and be an asshole. But I think, like, yeah, I think if you work towards sort of the virtues of life, then you'll be on a good track.
Yeah, the word that's coming to mind a lot is a word that my mentor used a lot, which just like, just are you being in integrity with yourself? That was a question that he would pose to me a lot, or pose to all of us a lot, was like, are you being in integrity with yourself? And I think that's what I'm hearing when you're referencing, like, you might misspeak, or you might like act not in accordance with your values, and then you have the opportunity to ask yourself, like, is this authentic to me? Is this in integrity with the values I ascribe to? And if not, who do I want to be about it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do I make it right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So can I take this moment to just ask you to like dig into this topic of you living off grid and off the land and building your own house and all of these things? You said you get a lot of questions about it. So yeah, is that a resource that you have for people, or do you just sort of like write back individual emails, or do you not even have time to respond to all those things?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to put a stop on the retail, because although it made us money, it didn't feed any of our other interests in life. And one of my interests is providing information for people, because I know it is really interesting to people. And but yeah, we lived in a tent for 3 years, like a canvas tent that was 13 feet by 15 feet, on a tent platform, and it was heated by wood stove. So it was basically like our camping tents that we use for our trips.
Wait, would you mind? Can we back up actually a little bit and just start from maybe a little bit earlier, as in like, how did you grow up, and what was the transition from your childhood to living in a tent?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I was a competitive athlete, so sort of the physicality of sort of the intensity of moving off grid was there. But my dad's side was all athletics, but my mom's side grew up in sort of cottage country, northern Ontario. So my grandparents lived on a lake, and because I was in sports, I didn't go to like the classic camp where you would go to canoe and whatever, do the nature stuff. But because my grandparents lived on the lake, that was my camp, and they built their own house. And my grandfather had this workshop that he was always in. He was blind in one eye, half blind in the other, and colorblind. And he just did amazing cabinetry work, like super talented. And carpentry never interested me as a kid, because I was such an athlete. I was like, I'm going to become a physiotherapist because I spent more time with the physio than I did my own parents. And so I wanted to help people that way through, getting people through their injuries. But I always admired my grandfather. I just loved watching him. And he just had this calmness about him that was like angelic a little bit. And I don't want to like hold him up on a pedestal, but like there was just something about him that was different than other people that I knew as a kid, but I couldn't like put it into words. I'm just like, this guy is really cool. And I think that stuck with me as like a part of my character development that I didn't really know was happening. And so once my sort of sports career was wrapping up, I had started going to university to become a physiotherapist. And I started at a really high-end university in Ontario. And my grades weren't doing very well. And I was like going to all the tutoring and workshops on like how to do multiple choice questions properly. And like my classes were 1,000 people. And I just, as I was like studying my ass off, like I knew the textbook from front to back. Like I was like, I know this information. Why can't I do these tests? I just started being like, there's something wrong. Like this isn't what I'm supposed to do. And so I started making a list of all of the things, like all the different career options that I liked. And I realized they all were outside. They all had to do with the outdoors. And I was like, okay, like I should go to school for the outdoors.
Is there such a thing?
Yeah. So I started, yeah.
Spoken like the true city girl. I love you so much.
Wait, I literally had no idea. There's a school for the outside. What? Okay.
Yeah. So I started, I don't even think Google was available, but let's just say I started Googling
Alta Vista.
yeah, exactly. And I found this university that was up north, and it was a 4-year Bachelor of Physical Education specializing in outdoor adventure leadership. And I was like, holy shit, like so it's not like an application where you just send in your marks. It was like you had to send in a whole portfolio of like who you are, like what do you do, what's are your interests. Like it was like this whole portfolio. And it was due like the next week when I like found it. I was like, oh my God, I had to get references. And so I rushed to do this. And then I like sent it in, got it in the deadline. And then I didn't hear back from them. So like me, my dad, and my mom drove up to Sudbury and was like, we had to like meet the program coordinator and basically like begged him to let me in. And he's like, well, early acceptances have already gone out, but you know, we'll consider it. And then yeah, the next week I got in. And
oh my God, I love that your parents were like all in with you.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's really
sure.
cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, just sort of rolling around in the mud with my grandparents. My grandma would send me down the dirt road to pick raspberries for pie, and like they gave us so much freedom as kids to like walk 2 kilometers to the local trailer park to go buy candy, or like go to the sand pit, and like we were allowed to just go as long as we told them where we were going. And so again, I don't think I realized that was who I was becoming. But it just was sort of ingrained in me. And so I think the adventure side and the outdoors, I always knew I wanted to own my own business. I just sort of, you know, even from a young age was like, oh, a physiotherapist runs their own practice. And I thought, oh, like I'll travel around with sports teams and, you know, that kind of thing. I just always had that initiative to do a good job. And I don't know, I just always saw myself owning my own business, but never really thought it was going to be winter camping. That wasn't like, you know, on my dream board when I was 10.
Yeah. It's really interesting though, because I mean, that really was a crossroads. Like if you had continued on that path, you would have lived a totally different life. You would have been possibly like working in a clinic with seeing patients it's just like such a different path.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming once you went to school for, what was it? Outdoor, like
outdoor adventure leadership was
outdoor
fun.
leadership.
Yeah.
That just really got the ball rolling, right? It's like, I feel like once you like, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is Kylie and I talk about how we like first quote unquote, like got into spirituality because it was something that maybe at one point we were interested in, but it wasn't necessarily part of our everyday life. Until we met people who had the same interests. Like we jumped into a world in which that's become our new norm. So like this, it used to be here and now it's here. And like we live in this world. And so now you're living
For
in this world.
listeners, that hand motion was to the side and then to the center. So it used to be to the side. Now it's in the center.
Now, and then we're like now in it. And now we're like in the center of it. So people will come up to me and still ask me like, how do you, I don't have a lot of spiritual friends, and how can I make this not, like embody this a lot more? And I think a lot of it really is having the fortune of, and also seeking out a community of people who don't think you're weird and it's like their norm too. And then it just becomes normal.
Well, it makes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, it makes me think of the point you made earlier about like living your values, right? Because this crossroads was kind of a moment where in some ways you were defining your values and also living your values, then choosing to live them, right? As like a 19-year-old kid, like, okay, what's actually important to me? Oh, it's not X, Y, and Z. It's, it's
being outside.
Yeah. And I think when we choose to live, when we choose to live in accordance to our values, I think it's easier to find our community, right? Because we're even if it's not an overt seeking out, like we're being that person in the world, so we'll like stumble into them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like, so from there, like I met Dave at university in the outdoor program, and we started our business right in university from our house in Sudbury. And the business, it was growing, and our basement was filling up, and we built a shed, and then shed was filling up, and we realized like it was only a matter of time that we need to start walking the talk as far as being an outdoor wilderness guiding company. We can't be operating from downtown Sudbury. Like we need to find land, and we had no money to our name. So all of the properties that we were looking at, that we were like, okay, road access would be really nice. But all of the road access properties were way out of our budget. Then of course, any property that had a building on it was way out of our budget. Any of the affordable ones were way far north that were really hard to get to. And we're like, well, we need to be close enough that people will actually be able to come and experience this land. If we're way up there, then no one's going to be able to take the time off to come and see us. And so I don't know if you guys have Kijiji, but it's sort of like Craigslist. You have probably Craigslist. This property just popped up, and it said 40 acres of paradise, and it was just 2 little pixelated crappy photos and GPS coordinates. And it took us 3 tries to find it. And once we arrived, and when I say find it, like we had to like walk through like marsh, like chest deep in water, like wading through with our compass, like trying to figure out which way we're heading.
Thank you for that visual, because I was totally being like, oh yeah, you drove Pat, and then I'm like, wait, no, this is not.
The time that we finally found it, there was this back road that you could get to, and we drove until we were directly north of the property, and we took our compass and just headed south, and just like beelined it through like thick forest, wetlands, and so when we arrived, we call it on Golden Pond, because we live on this pond, and we got out, and there's this beautiful bare rock, and it was sunny, and we were totally wet, so we just stripped off all our clothes and just laid on this rock, and we're just like, this is it, we found it.
Oh my God, I love this story. That's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
So then from there, it was like, okay, we called the owner, and we're like, okay, we love it, but how do you get there? Because there's got to be a better way.
Was there?
Yeah. So it's boat access. So we live on a pond, but we're connected to a big lake. So it's a 6-kilometer lake. So you park at the boat launch and then paddle, boat over. or by snow machine, and you can go by sort of back road trails to get in the winter. But
So
we
was
were
this
able.
when we're, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Is this when you were living on the tent then?
Yeah, so we lived in Sudbury at the time, and we had built up enough equity in the house, just enough to refinance and buy the property. And we had like $3,000 left to start our dream in the wilderness. So we didn't have anything. Like, we lived in, when I say downtown Sudbury, it's not LA, but it's like, it's a small city.
Mhm.
And so we didn't have a boat, we didn't have a motor, we didn't even have a tent, we didn't have a generator, we didn't have a chainsaw, we didn't have nothing. So with $3,000, we were just like, and go. And so for the next like 4 years, we were just like constantly trying to keep up with our debt and our growing business that we didn't have the infrastructure for. So it was just like we were spinning our wheels, just constantly trying to keep up. And yeah, it was stressful.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
It was stressful. And so like now when you look at our photos on Instagram or whatever, like we live in this house that we built. It's huge.
Wait, is this like, is the background your house?
Yeah, this is our bedroom. So it's unfinished,
Okay, 'cause
obviously.
I was like, it looks so nice. I didn't actually know if it was like a fake photo. Do you know how sometimes you can have the fake photo in Zoom, like of the backdrop? Like, it looks
Yeah.
just so cozy.
Yeah. Yeah. This is our, we don't have very many rooms in our house with a door yet. So this is the only room with a door.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, like I think if someone's just starting to follow us now, like it really looks like we've got our shit together.
Mhm.
And I think it's easy for people to see somebody that has their shit together to think, oh, well, like they didn't have the obstacles that I have to overcome to get there.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I'll do posts on like throwbacks, where it's like, hey, like this is us in our tent that we lived in for 3 years, where our dishwater froze every night, and we had to pump a lantern for 15 minutes to try and get it any light, and then sometimes we just give up and just go to bed in the dark, because it was just not worth it. Or like I had a memory foam pillow, and when I go to bed it would be rock hard because it would be frozen.
Oh my
like,
God, that's crazy. Oh my God.
Oh.
So I think it is easy for people to look at someone that they admire and like kind of think, oh, well, that could never be me. And so I think that's nice for people to sort of get to know you on a more personal level, to be like, no, like the obstacles were real. And how did we get through it? We just took it day by day. And like, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's really potent. I have a question that's been rumbling in your memory foam story, brought it to the front, which is, how did you end up specifically kind of having this specialty of like this winter travel? I've shared on the show, like, well, Eva loves the desert and is from LA. So Eva's a warm in Taiwan. So Eva's a warm weather girl. My family lives in Maine. I live in New England now. And I've been pretty transparent about having varying levels of seasonal depression, and like been very intentional about trying to like basically rewrite my relationship with winter, which this year was the first year that I was like, I'm not miserable the whole time. Go figure. My own distinction being realizing that I like the dark. I don't like the cold. And so then I was like, okay, well then just make yourself really warm all the time. And so it was a much better experience. But I guess I'm curious. And so as a result, now I'm like, I'm like really into winter in this particular kind of way, like almost like Oh, I like basically, you know, those like rom-com books and movies that is like, what is the like the trope is like enemy to lovers. That's like a little bit how I feel about winter right
Yeah.
now. Like, oh, are we, is this happening? Is
Yeah.
this
Yeah, you're doing the
Yeah.
dance.
yeah. So TBD on where we'll end up, Winter and I. But I guess I'm just curious if you could speak to like how Winter ended up being the space that you hold in particular, and what your own relationship to like winter and the cold and these kind of extreme these like pretty extreme experiences with winter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And maybe even like, because I do believe that it is possible to cultivate a beautiful, loving relationship with winter. And but I'm curious if you have any like hot tips on that.
Mm. Yeah, well, I am actually the type of person that doesn't like to be uncomfortable. So saying this,
That is not what I expected you to say.
yeah,
That's not what I expected. Because I was going to ask you, and I will continue, but I'm going to put a pin in it. But I wanted to ask you about discomfort in general, just because I think to live the kind of life that you live, you got to be uncomfortable, and I think that is my number one biggest fear. So
yeah,
I want to put a pin in that. But sorry.
yeah.
Continue.
No, I would not be doing this if I was like, it's a suffer fest all year. Like it's not, it's only for the diehards. I know. And so the winter style, the winter camping style that we do is the reason that I love winter, because we have rediscovered a way, and this was through a book called The Snowwalker's Companion. They are our first and foremost mentors in the style of camping. And then of course, people have been traveling by snowshoe with traditional gear since time immemorial. And then the Europeans came and introduced canvas, like a lightweight, tent, and the wood stove. And so it's really become this really efficient and practical way to experience winter. So it's not like I'm going out and like sleeping under a snowbank. We set up this tent, and like the days are hard, the days are uncomfortable, but with the right gear, the right food, a lot of food, we're drinking tea and hot chocolate all day. And then at the end of the day, you have this home that you've set up, and we're sleeping on a bed of boughs. The stove is roaring. We're in our t-shirts and like down booties and sipping wine like it's civilized. Like we're like, passing around the whiskey or having a glass of wine, and we're eating chocolate and like,
Yeah, it sounds so
as much cheese.
cozy.
It's romantic, and it's very civilized. And that is why we were like, we need to share this with people, because before, my experience with winter was, very tenuous. My feet get cold really quickly. My hands get cold really quickly. And so like me and my brother, we would make an ice rink in our backyard, and I would skate around for half an hour and then have to come inside because I was cold. So before I sort of was introduced to this style of camping myself, I was like kind of the same as you, where it was like, no, like I'm not really into winter. It's pretty, but from inside my house, through the window. And so that is one of our big sort of MOs, is like, let's show people how to be comfortable in winter. And it's a whole system that works together to make that happen. And I love photography, and just like the lighting and the landscapes in the snow and the winter are just like some of my favorites. And the solitude in winter is just beautiful. It's silent, like it's just, everything is muffled. And there's a beauty that can't be experienced anywhere, I don't think, except for in sort of this dead of winter. So yeah, like I really do think winter can be for everybody, but you have to just make sure that you've got the right clothing. How many times in Maine, right, like you'll see, or New England, people go from building to car to building. They don't they're not prepared to stay outside. So of course, when you go outside, you're going to be cold because you're wearing your small shoes, your light jacket, you've got your driving gloves on, and oh shoot, now I have to wipe my car and I'm freezing.
Yeah.
So,
That was the
we're not
big
going out.
That was a
Go ahead.
huge thing because where I live is really suburban and where my parents live is like semi-rural up in Maine. So they're like 4 hours north of me. And my mom would always say that line of like, there's no bad weather, there's just bad gear. And I was just like, fuck off, winter sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the big, but then we sent my son to outdoor preschool. So I have a 5-year-old, sent him to outdoor preschool. So obviously we had to get him all the like, he's got like the best winter gear in the whole house, right? Because we're sending him out every day. And that was the big turning point for me, I think, was like realizing, oh, I like the dark, I don't like the cold. And then, in watching how like, oh, Desi can be comfortable for 3 hours outside when it's terribly cold. And like, maybe my mom was onto something, and maybe I could buy myself like actually nice gloves and poofy hats.
And good gear is cool too. It's fun. Like it can get a little bit like dangerous, but like the stuff people make these days it's almost enchanting. I'm like, wow, like I don't know, technology, like, you know what it is that I like? I like things that are useful. I don't like buying things that don't have utility, but
spoken like a true Capricorn.
And so that's why I think like clothing like that is so interesting to me, because like it's so thoughtful.
Yeah. And that's a big part of our clothing system as well, is like we hand make our moccasins, our anoraks, our mittens, and they're custom size for your feet with however many socks you want to wear, and they're beautifully like simple and elegant, so functional. And that is like, also they look super badass too, so
cool.
I also really love what you're saying about I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm going to come on a winter trip. I'm already like deciding who I'm recruiting to come with me. And I think one of the things that I also love about what you're speaking to is like, one of the things that's great about winter is like cozying around the fire, drinking tea, and like being, there's a special kind of community, magic, I think, that you get to experience when it's like really fucking cold outside and the wood fire is roaring and you're all together, in particular after like, physical exercise. And so exactly. I really love the picture you painted in of the like the way that you get to celebrate winter in the tent in the evening feels really like, that feels really
it's like magical, like embracing the magic,
and like actually specific to winter in this particular kind of way.
And like in the winter time too, like we all eat our meal in one tent, so we're all just sitting around in a circle and have an opportunity to bitch and laugh about the hardships that you just went through that day. And like it's very much a communal tribe feel where you're like really able to come together, whereas in the summertime when you're camping, like a lot of times people will just like migrate to their own tents in the evening, and you won't get that same sort of bonding. The bugs come out and you're all just racing to your tent.
I will also say, I think there's I have a cousin who loves to go on these really intense hikes, and I asked her what is her favorite part of being outdoors in this way, and she's like, actually my favorite part is the fact that water never tasted so good on that hike. Hot chocolate never tasted so good on that hike. Like a bar, like a energy bar never tasted as good as the one that you're having when you're in that moment. And I think that's part of I don't know. I didn't really used to understand that until I experienced it. And I was like, oh, it's a heightening of everything. And it's an appreciation of everything and an enjoyment of everything that comes, I think, when like when you're in your body, and also just like in this simplicity. So it sounds like you're really, I don't know, I'm getting kind of excited because I'm like, you're reminding me, I think, of like the magic and the possibility of what happens in experiences like this. Can I ask, what is there like a screening process, especially in terms of like athleticism, that is required to join?
Not well. yes and no. Most of the time we recommend that people come on our intro trip.
Mm.
It's still an intense trip. It's still 1 week, like a full week, but we do 3 days at our base camp. So we're not moving camps every day. So we're still camping in the tents, but it's lessons on how to dress, how to wear your snowshoes, how to pack a toboggan, how to find firewood, and then we do a polar dip, and then we go, we cut a big giant hole in the ice.
Oh
And
my God, that sounds amazing. I love
yeah,
swimming in the cold.
yeah, and then we go out for 4 days, like to apply the skills and lessons that we learned at the training, out right from our property. So that's our first, like our 1 week sort of primer, and then from there we are able to suss people out and be like, oh, like you would love this trip, you would love this trip, this one, you know, and we sort of like guide people to the next step. So, but on occasion there'll be somebody that comes in and be like, I really want to go on your 2-week Northern Quebec trip, like sign me up. And then it becomes like okay, well, if you're not going to come on the intro trip, like tell us about yourself, and like then we'll get a good feel as to whether we think that they could be up for the challenge. And then we still might steer them towards the intro just to start it off. But you know, there has been times where we're just like, okay, I think you'll be a good fit.
Yeah. So I think I asked these questions because in terms of,
because you're vetting for me, because I literally am already like, oh yeah, this is cool, I'm in. I'm like, how long, who's gonna watch my kids? I'm intrigued by how much I'm like, you know, anyway.
Yeah, I think, and we even spoke about this, I think, on Kylie has the friend Liz who lives in Alaska, and she was just talking about like the wild.
Yeah, Liz is the one who's coming with me. She doesn't know this yet, but Liz is the first.
And she loves the cold, right? So like she's talking about like the wild and how, and I just found I was so drawn to that. And and I was talking earlier about how I have a real urge and pull to move my life closer and closer into nature and be of nature. But my two biggest fears are discomfort and also, I guess, athleticism. Just like worried that like do I have what it takes physically to get those things? So I guess I don't know if I have a particular question. I guess I'm wondering if you can speak to those things.
Yeah, I think being uncomfortable and, you know, physically exhausted are things that are within your wheelhouse to overcome. And I think the best way to overcome those is exposure. And realizing, you know, you can do it in small doses too, right? Like realizing like, oh, okay, I'm out in the rain, but I brought a spare change of clothes, so I can get completely soaked and then know that I'll always have this dry set of clothes. And so sometimes like I'll go on a trip and I'll pack my spare clothes and I will never pull them out, because I know that these clothes are the clothes that I have for an emergency when I absolutely need them. And then I realize I didn't need them at all. And because you kind of set yourself up to be like, okay, this is when shit hits the fan bag. This is the shit hits the fan bag. And then you realize like, oh, like it never actually got that bad. And that's like, I do that all the time with pretty much anything that I'm trying to overcome or budget. Like, for example, when I was on a loan, they give you a small first aid kit for emergencies. And in that first aid kit, they had 6 ibuprofens. And I said, okay, so I need to make sure that these ibuprofens I'm going to use in the absolute like dire situation. And there were times where I was like, I could really use this ibuprofen right now. But I was always like, but it could be worse. And so I would just like I would just get through it, without that. And I think, working in those sort of fail safes for you, where you're like, okay, I've got my little emergency kit for when shit really hits the fan, and then see how long you can go without actually needing that sort of kit. And I think you'd be pleasantly surprised at sort of how just even having that sort of backup psychologically helps you get through that discomfort.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think a lot of it is psychological, like those comforts of like the clean pair of clothes, like knowing that you have the ibuprofen, that's a mental backup plan / comfort. And then what I'm kind of hearing you say though, but at the end of the day, it's all a mental game. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that that's the reward, like knowing that actually you thought you couldn't do it and that you did it. And to me, in my Capricorn brain, like there's something very appealing about that, which is why I like going on these like crazy long meditation retreats, because I don't know, that stuff's kind of fun for me, but it's helpful to hear you say like, yeah, you just get over it. Because I think that to me is helpul. And maybe Kylie, you and I should go on one of these trips.
Oh
yeah,
gosh,
you
can
should.
we do it together?
That would be awesome.
Yes.
For sure.
I wasn't gonna ask you to come be super cold with me, but let's do it.
I mean, cold like this in a tent and cozy, in cozy.
I know you really sold it with the hot cocoa in the tent.
Yeah, for sure. It's a selling feature. But I do think go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I forgot about it because I got so excited about drinking hot cocoa in a tent with Eva. So
no, I was just gonna say sort of about like the physical strength that you would need. I also think that that's a mental game as well. And like, I mean, on our trip that we just came back from, there were days where you just like, you weren't sure how the heck you were going to get up and get moving and move 10, 12 kilometers, sometimes 18, 20 kilometers in a day. But you just got up and you did it. And I think humans in general, especially in this modern age, underestimate the power of the physical body and the capabilities that you have. And that is something that Dave and I both are really passionate about as well, is like physical activity is good for you. And the discomfort that you feel from that sort of physical activity is not only good for your body, but it's good for your mind and your soul. And so like, you should welcome that discomfort, because through that discomfort, you're going to gain so much more than just sore muscles the next day.
Yeah.
Ooh, can you speak to some of the things that you gain from that discomfort?
Yeah. And is it fair to say that like your experience on alone was that maybe like the most challenging experience that you've had?
Certainly the most challenging mentally.
Okay.
But I think through the physical challenges that were presented to me through starvation, I think amplified the mental. It all works together. It's all one system, right? And so through like the action part of the challenge for me was not the difficult part. It was pushing through and finding new limits, and feeling like you've reached your limit, and then going deeper and realize that you could keep going. And the number of times that I shattered what I thought was my limit was incredibly surprising and empowering to me. And that's why I don't have a lot of like empathy, I guess, for people that are like can cannot people. There's can do people, and then there's
Mhm.
cannot people.
Mhm.
And like people that just come up with excuses why they shouldn't or won't do what they should or want to do. I'm just like, you have to just do it, because you think these are obstacles, but once you realize that those obstacles are actually a way through to your next obstacle, because really life is just a series of obstacles. And once you overcome one obstacle, then that means you've graduated for the next one.
Mhm.
It's going to be there waiting for you. So, you know, yeah, I don't know, that's a bit of a tangent, but like life isn't easy. And so if you embrace the fact that you are just overcoming one obstacle and another, it could be physical, mental, spiritual, but once you overcome one obstacle, there will be another one there. So I
Yeah.
think that was, you know, yeah.
Go ahead.
I think something Kylie and I talk about on the show a lot is that these obstacles that you talk of, to us, they're just portals for deeper, for whatever you want to call it, deeper possibility or more self-awareness, or just more like, because like what you were talking about is like you shattered this level that you had and you broke through, and it was the shattering through the obstacle that like that opened you up in some way.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's almost like these obstacles, are they obstacles or are they portals, you know? Like portals to an
Yeah.
even deeper way of being. And they're, you
Yeah.
know, I think they're one and the same.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, like Marcus Aurelius has a great quote and just ends with, what stands in the way becomes the way. And so like, you know, that speaks to that sort of portal, where it's like, oh, I see this obstacle, but actually that is
That's
what
it.
I'm supposed to be doing. And like, you know, yeah.
I also think we carry such a, I mean, everything you're saying is really nourishing. And I think we carry such a strong idea that if we get through the right obstacle, then somehow it's just smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And the real trap of that is that as a result, we bump into obstacles and we read them as signs that we are either failing or are in the wrong place or don't have what it takes. Like we make meaning out of the obstacles as if like in a negative way. And what I hear you saying so gorgeously is like, of course it's fucking obstacles. That's the whole point. Like that's the whole game is like, oh, you leveled up. Here's the next, like, here's the next challenge. And so all it means is that you're at the next level of the video game, right?
Yeah.
It's literally the only meaning that actually can be ascribed. I mean, maybe if anything, the meaning you could ascribe is like, oh, cool, this is evidence that I'm here, that I am experiencing, that I am allowing myself to expand and be someone who takes on the challenges of I don't know, being alive in this crazy world.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, well, I mean, that's the point. You talked about how like, oh, well, that's it. You just get to the next level, but that is it, meaning you have access to more. You get to experience more. And what is life but not just for experiencing, right?
Yeah. There's like a beautiful, almost like nihilistic neutrality of the obstacle, which is like, doesn't fucking mean anything other than like, there's an obstacle. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. Interesting. I want you to know that I am taking all of this to heart. I feel like this is really inspiring to me. And in terms of like, you know, you feeling like you wanted to share info, like you're doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kielyn, I wanted to ask you a question about living off grid in terms of like societally. How does that feel? I don't know, that's like a big question, but like, how off grid are you? Do you feel disconnected from, I don't know, like whatever you would call it, like modern society, or do you feel in some ways more connected? I guess I'm kind of curious what your experience is in that way.
I think the difference between living in town and living out here is that we can choose how integrated that we are to a certain extent. Like we are 10 kilometers from our nearest neighbor. And then they are 15 kilometers from, the town.
Mhm.
So,
Wait, so is it usually just you and Dave? Like when you're not working, is it just the two of you?
yeah, so Dave and I live here, and we actually have a staff that has been with us since September, and she lives across the pond in a tiny home that we built, which was our original office when we moved out here. So she's been living here. She moved here like full time for now. So yeah, she helps us out.
Got it.
But yeah, other than that, it's our two animals. We have a Hank, our dog, and Lenny, our cat. And other than Larissa, we don't see anybody, unless it's on Zoom or online. And so we get to choose how much involvement we have with the cyber world. And in the spring, we really do kind of go dark because our winter season is so busy that we just need that sort of shutdown time where we're like,
Yep. Decompressing, alone time is sacred.
Yeah. So in that respect, like we are truly off grid. We heat our house with wood. We have solar for our energy. We collect rainwater for drinking, and we have an outhouse to use the bathroom. So pretty rustic, but also civilized.
Yeah.
And as far as society goes, like I don't feel like when I go into town, so it's like a town run, or like we have like a giant list of things that we need to do and get, and we just spend the whole day. It takes 2 hours to get to town. So then it's like, we got to get as much done as possible. We see the people that we always see, the ladies at the post office, they're always fun to see. And like the people at the hardware store and the grocery store. So like people know us and we get to interact with them. So that's sort of our connection to the community, which is nice. And they all follow us online too. So if they see something fun, they'll mention it. And so I just remember specifically, actually, I really like that you have to create a big list, because then you get it all done in one chunk. Whereas when I lived in the city, I would go to Home Depot or like the hardware store, and I would come back and be like, oh, I forgot one thing.
Right.
And then I would drive again, and like our city was pretty spread out. So it would take me an hour to like just go there and back just to get that one thing. And then you realize like, oh, like it wasn't that necessary. I could have waited until I had a bigger list. And I noticed that with my mom. She does that with groceries. Like she'll go to the grocery store and just get milk. But then she'll come home and be like, oh, I forgot to get bananas. So then she goes and gets bananas. It's like, just form a list and like, get it all at once. I think that disconnection is really nice in that sense.
So the reason I'm asking this question is because my partner and I are in Portland right now. We're probably going to move back to the desert where we came from. And I want to live away from the city in some like small town. I don't know where yet, just like out in solitude. And I could just like walk into the desert and be alone by myself for hours. So that's like what I want. The fear is, I love being by myself, and Kylie knows this. We talk about this all the time. I have no problem with solitude. I think it's where I like thrive. But I always, but Kylie also knows my biggest fear is like going crazy. And I often wonder, like, if I guess I worry. So far, reality has showed me that I'm fine by myself, and it's never been a problem since. But I think I just have a constant worry that like, oh, but if I'm too disconnected, like something, I don't know. I have this, I don't even know what the fear is. Maybe because that's never been my reality. I've lived in cities my entire life. So there's this weird fear of like, what if I'm too isolated? What if it's just me and Adam, and like, we don't have, we have Zoom and, we'll talk to people, I'll talk to my clients, but
You're
I
stuck
guess
with me.
Thank God I'm stuck with you. You can be like my human connection, but like, that's kind of what I want to get at, is like this disconnection. If I'm just like living alone, like what your life that you're explaining to me sounds fabulous. Like you get to go into the winter, have this really amazing connection with these people that, you're guiding through on these trips. And then you like come back to home, and then it's just you and Dave out in nature and your dog and your cat. And that sounds really lovely. And that's what I want. And yet for some reason it worries me. It scares me. So I guess I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So what do you have now that you won't have if you move to this hypothetical small town?
I have friends that are like 10-minute car ride away, and that's really nice. And we'll just kind of like meet and go for hikes. We'll go to dinner. But I will, or when we were living in Arizona, we had like Adam's family and we had like a couple of friends. So that was, I think maybe it's that. What else do I have that I'm afraid I wouldn't have? I think sometimes I like spending so much time by myself. Like, I really enjoy sometimes going into the city and just like people watching and just seeing and just looking at people and being like, maybe I'll have spent all day by myself, like, and then I just like being able to go out and see like, what are the city people doing?
And
I think
are you analyzing them based on their behavior, or could that also be fulfilled by watching nature? Because there's a lot of things like before we started this podcast, I made myself a tea and went and sat on a log and watched a beaver swim around and had 2 ducks like waddling around, and the sun was sort of drifting behind the trees, and I was watching the little ripples on the lake, wondering, was that a fish under there, or is that a little bug, or like what was under there? And so like that was satisfying my curiosity and sort of my wonder. That probably, in the desert, when you sit in the desert and start watching, like it looks like a desolate land, but there's sure a lot of it's full of life.
No, I think that's a really good point.
Also, you'll find friends in your new little town. Like for me, Espanola is a retirement town. Like there's very few young people. And yet I just love seeing the people of Espanola, where I'm like, you just build this connection with the people that you're around. So naturally you're going to gravitate to people. So I think you'll make new friends, and you'll stay in touch with the friends that were worth having in the first place.
That I know to be true.
The thing that I'm thinking about is first of all, when you were describing the like beaver and the ducks in the sunlight, my whole I just felt this like softness in my whole body. So thank you for just speaking that, sharing that moment. The other thing I will say, Eva, what I thought of as you were sharing your concerns is like, yes, this like reoccurring fear of like, oh no, what if I go crazy or whatever. But it actually made me think about how we spend so much of our time hungry for something in particular. In your case, I feel like it's like sovereignty and spaciousness and like simplicity and like a certain kind of understanding of liberation. And then when you get really close to actually getting the thing that you have said you've wanted for sometimes decades, I think we all kind of panic a little and we're like, oh shit, do I actually want that? And now I have to go be the person who I said I was going to be once I had this thing. And so I actually hear a little resistance that's wrapped up in like, oh, I'm going to get the thing I think I want. And that's its own kind of discomfort.
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, yes, beautifully said. And it's almost a discomfort of like, what if it's not at all like, what if it's not cracked, like all it's cracked up to be. Like, I'm afraid of disappointment maybe too, because like you have this idealized version of what it's going to be. So I think it's a little bit of that. And so I'm making up excuses. But if I'm being really honest, I feel a little sheepish for saying this, but I think what I'm looking for and am actually getting from you, Kielyn, because it's, again, you model just you being you're modeling it for me, is like, I think I'm looking for validation that it's okay to want to be this alone, because I guess I've heard you, Kylie, say like, or no, wait, sorry, it wasn't you. It was a client of mine who talked about how she felt self-conscious for being such an extrovert, and that she felt like she wanted to be around people all the time. And
I mean, that could have been me when I was your client.
Yeah,
I'm really different now.
I think it was, and so, you know, she needed validation that it was okay to be an extrovert and be around people. And I feel like I need validation to know that it's okay for me to want to be so alone, because I'm afraid that there's some part of that's wrong.
Yeah, I've always felt, and I didn't really know, like I am like a introvert extrovert. When I'm on, I can be animated and engaging, but then like when we turn this screen off, like I'm gonna go downstairs and be like, oh, that was exhausting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And like,
yes.
then I need like time to reboot. And I've always known that about myself, that I feed off of other people's energy. And so in good ways, when we're having good conversation, it can be engaging and really beneficial and nourishing. But when it's negative and you're trying to sort of like overcome that negativity and create a positive space, like it is so draining for me, to the point where like I need a day or more to recover from that sort of negativity. And like that's something that I'm always working on just through my studies and just life, is sort of balancing my energy levels and also not letting people take my energy as much. And so being that sort of introvert extrovert, like I'm perfectly comfortable saying like, I love my pond time, and like I need that time. You need your desert time, so that when you're on, you can be engaging and you can be sort of like at your best when you're engaging.
Yeah. I mean, I know that about myself too, and I think I just need to, and I want to go deeper into it. That's the thing. I want to go even deeper into it.
You're both really gifting me with something right now also. So thank you, because I was like, all of my 20s was just like, Kylie wants to be with Kylie wants to be like the lab, right? Like, how many people are around? Are we having a party? What are we doing? For the love of God, don't leave me alone with my own thoughts, right? Like, I was really invested in, I lived in the city. Like, you know, we were always like, I was always like at a coffee shop with someone or going to see music for someone, right? And I love that, like, for all that, there was a subtext of like kind of anxiety. There's also just like a tremendously joyful, fun part of my life. And I'm really different now in many, many ways. I like being alone, but I still really, what I'm realizing in this moment is that I don't actually give myself permission for how much alone time I would like, in particular because I have small kids. So my time is always either like working on my business or like parenting, or like maybe occasionally even hanging out with my husband, who I find very lovely. and that when I take time that's just like totally for myself and not doing anything, I have a lot of story, and I have thought it's because like, oh, motherhood guilt, but I actually am realizing part of the story is because I haven't allowed myself to fully be this person who I am now, who is someone who just fucking needs alone time.
Yeah.
So cool. Thank you. I can like feel space opening up. It's like, oh yeah, like you need water, you need vegetables, you need alone time.
Yeah.
It's so true. But that is interesting though, to see how that's shifting for you. And it makes sense though, because you have two small children, that need is going to become, you're going to have that need more, because you don't have
Well,
alone time as much.
I don't have alone time as much. And also I think like I definitely like, get really like lit up being with people that are my people. And now that I'm not running away from myself compulsively, it turns out I actually like to be alone.
Yeah.
That that's the thing that wasn't available for most of my 20s.
Yeah.
Do you find that there are moments where being alone gets to be too much?
It's funny because I've mentioned before that I'm very self-critical. So when I'm in a good place, the best place for me to be is walking through the forest. I find walking through the forest satisfies every part of my being. And in that space, I'm like completely at peace with everything and anything. When I'm alone and there's like a mirror that I have in my house and I look at the mirror and I'm immediately like, like you're fat and you're ugly and you're lazy and I'm just immediately like criticizing myself. And so that could be like this spiral of like negativity towards myself. But then like, I'm like working on just trying to kick myself in the butt and be like, no, like you're beautiful, go for a walk.
Yeah.
That's a great pep talk. You're beautiful, go for a walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're bringing up a good point though. Actually, this is the point that you guys are both pointing to, is that I think you need to be in a good mental place in order to enjoy your alone time. And I think that's it. And I think that's when it gets hard, is that when I'm not in a good mental, is that true? Yeah, I just don't, of course, like I'm not enjoying myself as much. If I'm like feeling particularly neurotic for some reason, or if I'm like anxious about some problem, then it's not as fun being by myself, at all. And that's when like, I think being around people can be really helpful too.
Yeah. Oftentimes I find the narrative that you're telling yourself can like completely destroy your alone time. Like when I was on alone, I would be giving myself really positive messages, pep talking myself and like overcoming obstacles together with myself. And then I would like fail at something and it would just be like a tiny, tiny little fail or what I considered a fail. And then I would just be like, just like raining down on myself. And then I realized I was just destroying myself. Like I was being so self-destructive. And a lot of it was because I'm a people pleaser and I was worried about what Dave was going to think, what my parents were going to think. Because what a lot of people don't know is that Dave was actually supposed to go on the show as well.
Oh, really? Same
we
season?
We both made it to the top 20. So we got flown to New York to do the boot camp, and they could only choose like one of us. They couldn't have us both on the same season.
Wait, sorry, can I interrupt and ask why not?
Well, for a bunch of different reasons. One, for us personally, it wouldn't have been good because our business would have no one to run it. But two, they thought it would be weird for the story, like where they were like, oh, husband and wife competing against each other.
Got it.
So they thought that would be weird. So they chose me. So now I'm like going on this show representing both of us, with the guilt that I've stolen his spot and the pressure to perform good enough that I was going to make him proud and like not feel like it was a wasted opportunity. So I like put a ton of pressure on myself. And I think that made the experience way worse because I was like, it took me until day 65 before I had this enlightenment of of just like, I just felt this enormous weight fall off my shoulders and felt at peace with the whole experience. And then from then on, just felt immense gratitude for the experience and the learning and like the limits that I had pushed through. And I was proud of myself. But up until day 65, like I was very hard on myself. I was still staying positive, but it was always at the back of my mind, like, you have to do well because you're representing Dave. And if you don't do well, then like he'll never forgive you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was heavy.
What was there like a moment that you can point to that allowed for that kind of spaciousness to show up?
I think just reaching like day 60 was like, okay, like I'm probably in the top 4 at least. And like, I wanted to get as much out of the experience as I could. And I knew that like I also was representing our business. And so the longer I could be on the show meant that that was going to be more airtime for our company, you know, basically. So I wanted to get in as many episodes as I could. And thankfully, you know, that worked out to that I got
you
to
were
the
there
end.
all the way till the end. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that was definitely strategy in my head, was like, you got to hold out until the end, which was a part of me pushing through my limits. So that was helpful. But at the same time, it was like, if I had known that, you know, if Dave had never signed up for the experience, there would never have been that weight, you know, to sort of bear that burden of like representing him as well, and making sure that when I got home, he wasn't going to think, well, I could have done better.
Yeah. Do you think that your relationship with how much pressure you put on yourself has changed since that experience?
Yeah, I mean, Dave wrote me a journal every single day that I was gone. And when I got home, he read it to me, and I was just like in tears, because it was like just the love and the pride that he had in me. It was just like, I wish I had have seen this while I was out there. Because my narrative that I was saying was, he was jealous, he was mad, he was at home running the business that like we are, you know, spinning our wheels at, that we're tired of. So like, he's at home just grinding the wheels, and I'm out here having this like incredible experience that he wanted. So that's like the narrative I was telling myself.
Wow.
So yeah, like, you know, when I got home, I mean, I never heard him, when the first time we got on the phone together, I never heard him bawl like that, like just in tears. And just like, he drove to the airport, like that, you know, the day that he found out I was leaving, and he's like getting on a plane to come, and he was just like bawling his eyes out. And oh, it was like exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
To just like, like, oh, okay, I was just making that all up in my head. And yeah, we're our own worst enemies sometimes.
I mean, I'm honestly a little bit overwhelmed by that story. It's thank you for sharing that. And I think it's very moving. But I also think what's funny is, like, as you were saying that, I just feel like it was the perfect metaphor for, I think, life, like in general, like how this is where I'm going to get kind of metaphysical, but every time I feel like I've touched close into God or the universe or source, I've remembered that they're like this benevolent sense of love. It's love, that like life is love, and I'm the one being crazy, and I have all these stories, And then suddenly I'm given like a moment of grace where I'm remembering, like, actually, no, like nature isn't judging you. Like God isn't here judging you. Like, source doesn't care. It's like you are held in unlimited, unconditional love at all times. And and I'm just, I'm the one, making up all these stories. And so I feel like,
and
I think
also that our stories don't actually change it, right? Like our stories also are irrelevant, as in like not irrelevant because like the suffering we experience because of our stories is felt, but like Dave didn't love you less because you had a mean story in your head, right? It was like the experience was over and then you just got all the love. You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes, especially in like spirituality corners, we can put so much pressure on having the right story. And I think sometimes there's something really beautiful to realize, like, even if our story is really mean to ourselves, the entire time, like we still are actually constantly receiving like transcendent love.
Yeah. Whew.
That feels like a good
Yeah.
I don't know where we go from I don't know where we go from transcendent love.
I mean, Kielyn, is there anything that we didn't ask you that you want to speak on?
No, I mean, we could go on and on, I bet. So
I mean, you can always come back.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, that would
Where
be
can
great.
people before we'll do our round of joy, but before we do that, where can people find you?
Our website is lureofthenorth.com, and then we're just at Lure of the North, one word, on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Cool.
Yay.
Thank you. Should we do our round of joy?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, Kielyn, what is something that's bringing you joy right now?
Oh, so much, but definitely my animals. I miss them a lot, and there are so many life lessons to be learned from animals, and in particular, well-adjusted animals that love nature is just like, I mean, just yesterday it was a beautiful sunrise. It was cold out. I was sitting with my blanket on my deck with my tea and my book, and I look out over the pond, and off to my left I see Lenny, my cat, and he's just sitting on a bare rock, just looking out the pond, just like just enjoying the morning. And I was just like, you can't get any more at peace than that. And so just like entering in that sort of energy, like feeling that energy from Hank and Lenny, I just can't get enough of.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Kylie, would you like to go next? What's something that's bringing you joy?
Okay, Jennifer, you can edit out my very long thinking moment. So I want to say the body and my relationship with the body, which if listeners remember, I actually forgot to this very moment that I set my New Year's resolution on the show, like resolution, air quotes, about kind of opening up space to have to just be in relationship to the body in a different way. And that has been this really beautiful unfolding without any like great effort, right? Without like, it's just like I set the intention to be in relationship different. And it has just been unfolding. And so I recently actually started working with a naturopath doctor, who's a former client of mine, who I was like So I know her magic intimately. And so I was really, really excited to like trade places and like be in her receiving. And so we had our first call the other day, and it was this space of like, okay, let's talk about the gut, and let's talk about like what my body is communicating to me. And let's talk about like the like spiritual, emotional components of the body. And let's talk about poop. Right. And like, it was this, I said to Ashley afterwards, like, this is the first place in my entire life where all of these parts of me in relationship to the body get to show up, as opposed to just the me who's talking to my doctor about very specific things, or just me who's, you know, maybe talking to a girlfriend about body image, or right. It was like all of that, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, the like curiosity to look at things in a new way, all got to show up. And I just felt like I've never been witnessed like that before. And it felt so fucking delicious. And that was just last week, and already I'm like, oh, everything's different. And things like understanding my own, like feeling like one of the things that I was feeling really frustrated about, which was like feeling real confusion about my hunger, like literally like walking into the kitchen 7 times a day and being like, I don't understand what my body wants me to eat. And like, so realizing that there was like some kind of disassociation happening, that like, I would like to eat, I'm confused by all choices. Right.
Yeah.
And even in a couple of days, I can feel how much I'm like, oh, I can hear you. Oh, you want scrambled eggs? Okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
So yeah. So the body and Dr. Ashley.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I'm really excited to see how your journey goes and what you learn. And I also think there's something really nourishing about learning about the body in this way. So I'm like really excited for you. I think that's going to be really fun.
Yeah, it feels really great.
I would also
I'm
like
sure
to have a positive experience with my body. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter how good you look or how, like, it's just, you're never like I admire people that love their bodies, no matter what, you know, shape or size they are. Just like, I have never been there because I was a gymnast, and from age 7, my coach was like poking me, telling me I was fat. So like, you know, it's ingrained in me. And so I've just been trying to like reverse it. But yeah, maybe I need to see your doctor.
Oh, she's amazing. I'll send you her information. And I couldn't recommend it more. And I think it actually influenced. So Liz, my friend from Alaska, who we mentioned earlier, and we host retreat a couple times a year. And actually a lot of the body, anyways, it's influenced the retreat that we're doing this July. We're doing it about the body in particular, because there are so few spaces. I find the spaces are either fix the body or let's talk about how great your body is and love the body. And there isn't actually a space in the middle, which is like, I don't fucking know. I just like to not be at war with the body. Right? Like maybe we can get to be loved, but like right now, can we just shift out of like confusion and anger? And outside of this space with Ashley, I have felt like I felt like my whole life I've been looking for spaces for that. And so that's actually influenced a retreat. So I'm really excited about that too. But I will send you Ashley's info.
Nice. Thank you.
That. It's beautiful.
All right, Eva, what brings you joy?
Okay, there are a couple things. I'll share the simple one. I'm obsessed with a new podcast. It's called Heavyweight. I think obsessed is the kind word. I would actually say I'm a little bit addicted. That's how good it is. Kylie and I think you've talked about how like I haven't listened to a podcast since This American Life. I know that you and I both had like these romantic relationships with This American Life. It's
part of the romantic relationship was my deep infatuation with Ira Glass.
Right,
Carry
exactly.
on.
Yeah. Heavyweight. If you guys are looking for something a little if you want to take a break from Hello Universe, I don't know why you would, but just in case you are, you can go check out Heavyweight. It's It's a podcast about this one guy, Jonathan Goldstein. He actually does a bunch of stuff on This American Life. He calls himself like someone who goes into like a therapist with a time machine. So he goes back, people will write him with questions unanswered from the past, like some popular girl asked this guy out to the prom, who this dorky guy out to the prom, and he never knew why, or what happened to this like friend that I met one summer who I never saw again, or just these really interesting stories about people who have regret or just have some curiosity about the past, and he'll go and he'll investigate and have these then difficult conversations with in the present. And it's like, and it's funny and it's delightful and
Are
it's
they
charming,
all his
it's
own
heartwarming.
experiences, or
So the first season starts off with just, I think it's mostly his experiences. So it's like the first episode is like him helping his dad and his brother. They have an estranged relationship, and then they have like a coming together. Another one is about like this art school film that he saw in college, and there's this like little girl in the film who he was like, he never got this little girl out of his mind, and 25 years later he like went to go find her to see like how she was, just like stuff like that. So
yeah.
and then later on as the show builds, I think it's like a lot of people writing in to be like, hey, can you help me with this? It's fun and it's fascinating, and it's very talks about people, and I love people. So if you guys want something else to listen to, check out Heavyweight.
Nice.
It's fun, and they're short too, so like you can listen to it like,
Unlike Hello
yeah, unlike Hello Universe. Yeah. All right. I mean, Kielyn, this is
so
amazing.
much.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you very much for your wisdom and your grace. And I appreciate you having me. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yay.